This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Today's episode is brought to you by Audible.com. One of the most powerful questions my sponsor has ever asked me is, can you love your unlovable parts? Sometimes the answer is no, but the truth is that recovery is about recovering our whole selves, even our character defects and human shortcomings. That's really kind of tough to swallow, right? But obviously nobody is perfect, so it's silly to pretend that we are. But how do we practice self-love in the face of character defects? Well, one way is to practice the ideas in a book called Radical Self-Acceptance by Tara Brach. I listened to this audiobook over and over because it has one of my favorite guided meditations on it, which I bookmarked in the app. So Tara's voice is smooth and calming, and listening to her speak makes me feel relaxed and peaceful. So that's not a bad way to feel, right? And there's no unwanted side effects like, a hangover or an STD. I'm just saying. So ODAT Chat listeners can get this audiobook for free when you sign up for an Audible subscription by visiting odatchat.com and look for the Audible ad on the right-hand side. I hope you like it as much as I do. Welcome to ODAT Chat. My name is Arlena, and I'll be your host. In case you didn't know, ODAT stands for One Day at a Time. If you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, or you can get new episodes delivered right to your inbox by signing up for the newsletter at odatchat.com. I think I only email maybe twice a month at the most, so you won't get overwhelmed with emails from me, but you will have an easy way to listen. So you might be wondering what the purpose of the podcast is. And really the podcast is to help clear up a lot of the misconceptions about addiction and recovery. I also wanted to share the teachers, ideas, and exercises that have helped me on my own journey over the last 24 years. And today's episode is with David Griggs. He is an attorney. Actually, he's more like a legal superhero in my book because he handles a lot of sexual harassment cases for women. So I think he's awesome. But he is also a soon-to-be published author. He took Anna David's memoir book proposal class called All the Right Moves, and that is right with a W. Super clever she is. He got voted for the best proposal and won a meeting with a publisher and eventually sold his book, which was super awesome. He'll tell the story in the interview along with his addiction and recovery story. David talks about some of the trauma he experienced growing up, which kind of was some of the roots of his addiction. And he also talks about switching addictions from things like alcohol to weed to sex and even video game addictions and the effects all that had on his life. David is a great guy. I'm actually going to have him back after he launches his book. I think he's going to go on a book tour or something, but I'll definitely have him on the podcast again. I think his book is due to be released in December. So look for that. So anyway, without further ado, please enjoy this episode with David. Yes. All right. Well, David, thank you so much for joining me on the ODAT Chat podcast.
Hi, Arlena. How you doing?
Doing just fine. It's a beautiful Saturday morning in June. And I'm super excited to have you on. I was introduced to you through Anna David, and I reached out to her because I want to join her book writing class. And she's like, hey, you got to talk to my friend David. He just finished. And out of the class, you received wait, maybe I should let you tell the story. So you were in Anna's class and what happened?
Yeah, sure. So Anna takes 10 people through each class, and it's a 6-month class. The end product is to put together a proposal to pitch a memoir to a publisher and an agent. And so you write part of the memoir, you outline it, you put together a marketing plan, you put together a comparison of your book to other books that have sold already, you do a pitch letter, you put all this stuff together. And at the end of it, everyone submits it at the deadline, and a committee selects one book proposal to go to a publisher and an agent. I was very lucky, and mine was selected.
That's amazing.
And, yeah, I was blown away. Actually, I really did not expect. There were some really talented folks in the group.
There was nine other people that were in this class as well.
Correct. Yeah.
A total of 10 people. Okay.
And, yeah. So when I got my email saying I had been selected, in the email it also said, and by the way, the publisher wants to offer you a publishing deal. So I got an offer
amazing.
for a publishing deal, which really kind of my jaw dropped. I'm like, what? I did not.
You want to tell us how much it was for?
Yeah, millions of dollars. No.
Millions. You're retiring after this.
No, it's not like that.
No, yeah.
But yeah, very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah, congratulations. That's a really big deal. Yeah, it's my understanding that she had some really good people in that class and great stories. And so that's a big deal that you were selected. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very honored and grateful and humbled by the whole thing.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Like when we reach these periods of success, isn't it interesting that humbled is like the common experience people have, don't you think?
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, for me, I beat myself up so much just through the process. It's like always like, well, I'm not quite doing enough. And, this isn't very good. No one's going to want to read this, this is boring, or this is, and then there's this also I don't know that I want to tell the world all these things. And there's that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause those are some gut wrenching things, right? Well, we'll get into it, but I usually start the podcast with asking you what you do for a living.
Oh yeah, sure. My regular job is I'm a lawyer.
Okay. What kind of law do you practice?
I do mostly employment law. I represent people in workplace disputes. Like a lot of my clients have been victims of sexual harassment or discrimination or wrongful termination of employment, not getting paid appropriately.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We need lots of yous in the world. So thank you for the work that you do.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's very rewarding work. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Okay. And you're currently living in Oregon?
Yeah, I live in Hillsboro, Oregon, which is a suburb of Portland, just out on the west side of Portland.
Very nice. And where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a military family. My dad was a career Army officer, and we moved all over the place. I spent a lot of time in the southeast part of the United States. Spent a couple years in Korea when I was growing up.
Oh, really? Did you learn to speak Korean?
I did. I learned a little bit back then. Of course, I was like 7, 8 years old, so I can still say "감사합니다," which means thank you, which is a good word to remember.
Yeah, and you should be able to order food, right?
Yeah, I could. I love Korean food. We had a woman who worked in the home. She was like a housekeeper and to cook. And so I still, when I walk into a Korean restaurant and I smell that, it just takes me back. It's one of those kind of comfort food things for me.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, and do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a sister who's 4 years younger and a brother who's 10 years younger.
Oh, interesting. 4 and 10. Are they both full siblings?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so your dad's a military officer. Does your mom work?
Yeah, she was, well, they're both retired now, but she was a school teacher. So she usually, wherever we lived, and we moved pretty much every 2 years.
Wow.
We never lived anywhere longer than 2 years, sometimes after a year. But she usually found a job as a school teacher. Occasionally she would get a different type of job, but most of the time she was teaching.
Okay, that's interesting. So moving frequently like that must have been really hard on you as a kid, right?
Well, when you're a little kid, you don't really know any better. And, I didn't really think of it as being difficult until the move after junior high. So between 8th and 9th grade, that one was the first time where I really resented the move.
Why did you resent it? Were you,
I was,
friendships?
Well, we were living in Florida for one thing, which when
you were loving it.
When you're in junior high, that's the best place to be. You got beaches and, you start to, there's girls you like and
Oh.
You start to form, I think, more of a friendship with friends than you had when you're a little kid. And we moved to a small town in Georgia, which was totally different from Tampa, Florida. And I just didn't want to leave my friends. And, the girl I liked actually was probably one of the big factors. But, you deal with it. I had another move in the middle of high school, but after 10th grade. And that one, actually, I didn't mind that one because we got out of Georgia and went to the Washington, D.C. area.
Oh, very cool.
I like, yeah. And that's where I ended up graduating.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
So what was your family life like?
So my dad was a busy guy. His particular job in the Army took him many different places. Vietnam a couple times. He was often off. He couldn't tell us where he was going, wouldn't know when he was coming back. He worked a lot with intelligence type things. So he would just be gone. So it was pretty much my mom and the kids and our pets most of the time. So it was, it's very nomadic. We moved a lot. The typical pattern was you move to a new place, you don't know anybody. And so I kind of learned how to be self-sufficient, and then you make friends. And then by the time you become friends, then you move again. So, on one hand, you learn how to adapt to new places. I'm comfortable going anywhere. And on the other hand, you don't really learn how to connect very well.
Oh, yeah.
You have this transitory lifestyle.
Right.
But yeah, I suppose in a lot of ways it was kind of a typical 70s growing up experience. I grew up, I was born in 1963. So most of my formative years were the 70s, graduated high school in 1981. We moved around. We spent a lot of summers in Oregon where my family grew up. My dad grew up in Oregon, my mom in Idaho, just across the border. So I kind of had some roots here, ended up going to college here and then settling down here once I was raising a family.
Oh, okay. Summers in Oregon. So is that where your grandparents lived? Is that where you went for the summer with grandparents?
Yeah, my dad's parents lived in Cottage Grove, Oregon, which is kind of in the very south part of the Willamette Valley, south of Eugene, Oregon. They've been there for like 3 generations. And they had some property down there, forest property. And so it was kind of a rural, I'd have at least a few weeks every summer where I'd get to go out into the woods and learn how to drive.
Very cool.
12 and shoot guns when I was a little kid and, all that kind of country stuff. And then I'd run off to wherever we were going, which was varied and far and wide. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So where does drinking kind of start in? I mean, was your dad a drinker or your mom or?
They both drank. I mean, I always thought my first drink, I was about 7 years old. My dad would throw these big cocktail parties, and we were living in Korea at the time. And he would throw these big parties, and all these Army and Air Force, all these military officers and their wives would come over on a Friday night, Saturday night, and they'd have these big blowouts, And I would go around and bust the empties. I actually helped bartend. And I remember drinking, as I take these things back to the kitchen, I'd be like, oh, what's that? It's like got a little onion in it. It was vodka martinis on the rocks and things like that. I remember that being my first drink. And my dad later told me that I actually started doing that at the age of 3. So I developed a taste for it early.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. Why do you think you just saw your parents doing it, so you thought you would try it?
Yeah, I wanted to be a grown-up, I think. But I didn't really start to drink until about the age, I was 13 going on 14. And that's when I really hit it hard. And it was after some childhood trauma that it took me years to kind of piece this together and figure out what caused it. But I just thought, it's when I started high school. And so from about the age of 14 on, I was drinking alcoholically.
So you had, and I know we talked a little bit earlier about this event. So you're writing a book, and we'll save we'll save the actual event for the book, but maybe at a high level, you can just sort of tell me like how it affected you. Like you had something traumatic happen to you, and then what happened? You turned to or I mean, I'll just let you tell the story, but what happened to whatever degree you're comfortable talking about it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm kind of saving it for the book, but the reveals, because the way I came to realize what happened, I mean, this is something that happened fairly recently. My realization, but there was this traumatic event that I was involved with when I was I was just 13 going on 14. It was just really, a couple months from when I was turning 14. And it was one of those things that was very horrifying and shameful to me. And I never spoke about it again. I just, stuffed it in my memory and just never dealt with it. Didn't tell anybody. There was only one person in the world who knew about it, and he wasn't going to talk about it. So I just kind of went through life just stuffing that down. And, there were a few moments when I would think about raising it with like an intimate relationship situation. And it just didn't work out. And I didn't. So really, as I came to this realization last year that was what was really holding me back from getting deep into recovery and not relapsing in various ways. That freed me tremendously. When I started to share that story, I realized, wow, okay, I feel actually physically lighter after the first time I shared that with somebody else. And then I started to do it more. And that kind of led me to this whole book writing process where I decided, I really kind of want to write this stuff out. And, there were some, every childhood has some sort of adverse experience, trauma, if you will. And I decided I just wanted to start writing all this stuff out. And I found this memoir program, and I decided I would do that because I figured it would force me it would give me some accountability to write it. And so,
and as some support too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And other people are doing it. And so
recovery memoirs are not for the faint of heart.
No.
It's gut wrenching. I started doing it on my own, and it's gut wrenching. I've been keeping journals since I was 10 years old, and I had to refer back to my journals. And then I had to call some people and be like, I don't remember what happened during this period of time. And it's really gut wrenching. So was that having a support group? I'm sure they were all going through that same process too, right?
Yeah. And a lot of people, relate to that because one of the things I found and other people have mentioned was when you start doing it and you actually start writing it down, you start to remember things that you didn't remember. It's almost like you peel back one layer and then there's another one, and you sort of, your mind goes back to the time, and it can be very I don't know, traumatic is the right word, but stressful certainly to resurface all these things and bring them out. But then there's this tremendous release. Like for me, it was all worth it. It's been, and I'm still in the process of finishing the book. But it's good. It's really just good to know it's kind of like a recovery meeting. It's good to know you're not alone, right? And everybody, I think, has their own unique bad experiences, and it's very powerful to share that with others. And that this addict, like to isolate and just try to internalize everything and deal with it himself. And so recovery is a huge step forward with that. And then I've been through recovery a few times, but I never got to some of this stuff ever. Really? In working through it. Yeah.
So let's take a little step back though. So what led up to I mean, you don't have to share all the gory details, but what led you to decide, like, so you're drinking, and are there drugs involved?
Yeah, my story involves lots of alcohol. Principally was
Mm-hmm.
my main thing for many years. But yeah, other drugs, pot, cocaine, meth, even a little bit. Not, I don't think I wasn't a meth addict, but I was a meth user at times.
A social meth user?
Well, yes, actually.
I know, right? Because if it's there and you're
I
socializing.
know. Yeah, I know. I mean, meth was. I probably did meth maybe a dozen times over the course of 2 or 3 years. Um,
Yeah.
but I usually couldn't afford cocaine, but when I was really heavily drinking, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Cocaine actually was what brought me to recovery in 2000 when I
Oh,
really got
really?
serious. Yeah.
So what happened in 2000 that you decided you needed to get some help?
So I was at that point in my life, I was working in a software company that was riding the dot-com bubble, and
Oh, mm-hmm.
I
I'm in
had
Silicon
graduated.
Valley.
Yeah, yeah. I was working up here though, and I had graduated law school. I had a law degree. I'm an MBA. I have all these all this paper money that is growing by leaps and bounds. And I was down in San Francisco for a trade show, and rather than going to the trade show, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to drink my ass off. And that's what I did. And I ended up going on a bender. At that point in my life, I was only drinking like on the road. I didn't drink around my family, and my kids were young. My wife, I didn't never drank around her for years because I just was trying to hide it from her.
Uh-huh.
So I went on this huge bender, and I blacked out, and I came to in a seedy hotel room with a bunch of people smoking crack.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. And
In San Francisco?
in San
That's
Francisco,
gnarly.
basically with street people,
Oh,
and
really?
I yeah, and crack really brings you out of a blackout, as it turns out. But I I had I spent several hours just smoking massive amounts of crack, um,
Wow.
and subsequent to that, the next day, actually no, wasn't the same day. It was the day I got home, which was the following day. I suffered severe chest pains, and I thought I was having a heart attack. And so I went to urgent care, and they ran tests on me, and they said, well, no, didn't have a heart attack, but the doctor was like, what have you been doing? you know,
Yeah, I've been smoking some crack.
and I was so scared that I actually told him the truth. I,
What did he say?
yeah, I know. That's amazing, actually, because he was this older gentleman. He was probably 65. It was like telling my grandpa I was smoking crack. And
How humiliating.
yeah, I was like 37 at the time, and so I told him, and he just looks at me like, really? Because I did not look like the kind of guy.
You don't look like a crack smoker.
And I didn't then either, because I was a lawyer. I sold software to lawyers. I mean, that's what I
Yeah.
did. And so he's like, you shouldn't do that.
Captain Obvious.
Yeah, and he actually suggested that I go to 12-step meetings. And
Oh, he did.
um,
Okay.
yeah, and I'd been in those types of meetings before. It'd been a long time.
Oh, you had what prompted you to go to
Well,
12-step meetings before that?
10 years prior, I was actually in the National Guard while I was in college, and we had a urinalysis, and they didn't like what they found in my urine.
Oh, what was in it?
Fortunately, it was just marijuana.
They frown upon that, do they?
They didn't. They said, you can't have that in there, and so they gave me a choice. I could either, get stripped of rank and all this stuff,
Oh,
or
brutal.
go through all that humiliation, or I could go to counseling
Mm-hmm.
and get slip signed and that sort of thing. So I
Okay.
chose that route.
Counseling. Yeah, it's easy.
And so I found a counselor, an addiction counselor, and went to probably maybe a dozen meetings with him. And he wanted me to go to recovery meetings too. So I did that. And, I didn't really embrace it, but what it did is it caused me to slow way down. So I went from being pretty much a daily heavy drinker, and at that point, pot and booze were my staples for the day, to a binge drinker. So I could string together 3 months, 6 months.
With no weed?
With no weed, because I was going to get tested again.
Okay.
So that was, I had a strong incentive there. And then the alcohol, though, I actually made it I think I made it not quite a year, about 9 months. And the good news is it enabled me to finish college, because I had been unable to finish college because I kept drinking myself out, of classes. And so I was able to at least gain some footing. I finished college. I got a job teaching overseas in Japan. I went off and did that. I was married. We had our baby over there. I came back, went to law school. And so there's about a 10-year stretch there where I was a binge drinker. So I would, I'd go 3-6 months. I think I went my whole first year of law school without any. So that was probably about 9 months. And then I would go on a binge. I'd have some opportunity to go and do that. But I wasn't in recovery. I just was, white knuckling it between binges.
And during your binges, would you black out and get in trouble with the family? And
usually I was out of town or they were out of town. One thing I never drank around my kids. I did smoke pot, but they didn't know I was smoking pot.
You can hide that. You can't hide
alcohol
drinking. Yeah.
So no, I would use, I would go on these. Either I'm out of town, or my wife would take the kids and go visit her mom for a few days or something like that. But usually at the end of it, when I'd see her after that, she would look at me and it didn't look the same.
What's wrong with you?
After that, but yeah, blackouts were not. I didn't always black out, but they definitely happened. Yeah, I often drank to black out.
Yeah, and you never got into any kind of legal trouble other than like with the National Guard?
Yeah, that's the only time I ever got busted for anything, but which is just the dumbest luck ever, because I was pulled over a few times while I was intoxicated, and just by fortune, I didn't get it. The last time I was really quite bad, but I look up, the cop pulls me over. I look up and I recognize him, and he was in my National Guard unit.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
And he was like, David, what are you doing?
He's like, yeah, what are you? He said, where are you going? And, I was in a parking lot going to an apartment complex. I was really just crawling because I was quite out of it. And I said, I'm going right up here. And he goes, okay, I'm going to watch you park your car and you're not going to get out of it again. And I did that. It was about 50 feet away. And I saw him later at guard drill, and he's like, yeah, you were a keeper.
Wow.
And I had on me, I had a bunch of cocaine and
oh
pot.
My God.
It would have been
all bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't know you had all that though, right?
No, he didn't know that. No.
I wonder what he would have done if he knew you were holding.
I don't know. There's certainly a brotherhood there, so I don't know that he still would have busted me, but it's hard to say. With the cocaine especially.
Right. Yeah, that's, they frown upon that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounded like you had some, and the funny thing about being a binge drinker is it's easy to tell yourself that you're not powerless and your life is not unmanageable. Right. Yes. It's
especially when you're excelling at law school and
you're a badass, right?
Yeah, for the first time in my post, undergrad, or in undergrad, I barely got out of there. I had every letter on my transcript that you can possibly accumulate. But
every letter meaning.
Oh gosh, F's, W, Y. What's a Y? I don't even know. X, I. I had every letter that
Incompletes, withdrawals.
yeah.
What is a Y? I have no idea.
No basis for a grade. I don't even know what that means, but I had Ys. It was like, why did you enroll?
Why did you enroll?
But in law school, I did really well. You know,
Interesting. Why did you do so well in law school?
I was sober and I was very determined.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
My first year, I was sober, completely sober.
It's amazing what we can accomplish when we're sober.
Yeah. And I was really, you know, our daughter was a year old when I started it, and I was very determined to do well so I could get a good job and all that kind of thing.
So you were motivated by providing for your family?
I was, yeah. That kept me alive, I think. Was that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'm not sure I would have cared enough to stay sober. So
did you ever? I'm sorry, what was that last part?
I said to stay sober in between my binges.
Yeah, that's the tough part, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, I'm just always curious about recovery, right? Like, what was your path? Because there's so many people who, you know, they try to stay manageable. They think their life is manageable. They can justify or rationalize their drinking or drug use. What was it that finally brought you to your knees? And I mean, I know you, a year ago had that realization that you had suppressed a traumatic event, but you had a long period of sobriety before that. So what preceded that, you know, long stint of sobriety?
Right. Well, so it was that trip to San Francisco where I came home. I thought I was having a heart attack, and I got deep into recovery at that point. I did it by the book. You went to
You went to 12-step meetings?
Yeah.
Did you go to NA or AA or?
AA. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And because I wasn't really addicted. I mean, cocaine was something I used, but it wasn't really my drug of choice was alcohol, really.
That was the thing that you couldn't stop. Did you have that experience where you tried to stop and you just couldn't?
Yeah. And the key was whenever I had a drink, I couldn't stop.
Okay.
I could put together some time between drinks, but once I had one, it was, 15.
Right. There is no one drink.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the 15th one that gets you. It's the first one.
It is.
Okay. So so that you are having heart issues. Yeah. Doctor says, no, it's the crack.
Yeah.
So you go to, he recommends going to meetings, and you just surrendered to the process. And
I did. I went home and I looked. I think this was 2000, so I'm pretty sure I looked online, and I found one for the next morning. And this was like it was a Friday, and the next one, I think it was a Saturday morning one, and it wasn't that far from my house. I'm like, well, I've been to these before. I didn't mind them; they were okay. But
I didn't mind them.
I didn't mind. It's funny because the very first meeting I ever went to, I thought it was a date. I'm digressing a little bit. I was like 24 maybe, and drinking heavily at that point. And there was this girl I really liked, and we would have lunch together. We were in a class together, and she went out to lunch with me and stuff. And of course, I always drank a lot at lunch. and one day she's like, hey, I'm going to a meeting tonight to help support a friend. How'd you like to go? And all I heard was, do you want to go out with me? And,
yes.
And so I said,
yes, I do.
Yeah, I definitely want to go. I'm there, and of course I had several beers before I went, but it was an AA meeting. And I sat through it the first time I'd ever been exposed to that. And
wow.
I just remember thinking, wow, this is really cool. These people are so honest, right?
Yeah.
I'm so glad I don't have to do this, but it's really good that this is here for them.
These people, these poor people.
Poor people.
I know.
And so she asked me afterwards, how'd you like it? I go, it's really interesting. That's cool. I'm so glad your friend is doing that. And she kind of looks at me and she goes, well, do you think you'd ever like to go to any others? I said, I don't know, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure why I would, but yeah, if you're going.
If you're going, I'd be happy to hang out with you.
We didn't have many more dates after that.
She's like, he's not getting it.
Yeah, he's not getting it. Staying away from that.
None of this, none of that.
Yeah. And so that was my first exposure. So, and then I had a few when I had the National Guard issue. So I knew what I was doing. So I walk into this meeting just feeling horrible. Like I was so in self-pity, oh, woe is me. I am in the church basement. I'm supposed to be a lawyer. I'm supposed to be this master of the universe now. And I have to do this. And I'm just head down, and it's one of those meetings that's got the big conference table with chairs around it and then chairs behind those against the wall. And those are all taken, and I'm pissed because I have to sit at the table. Not only that, but near the front because I'm late. and I sit down, I just put my head down, and they start talking, and it's like anyone the first 30 days, and I'm like, fine. I put my hand up, and then at some point in the meeting, I just remember they asked me if I wanted to share. And I didn't want to share at all. But for some reason I did.
Oh, you did? That's so brave.
I did. I think I was just so beaten down. I didn't really have all my guard up or something. And so I shared, and I actually had it was just your classic first share. Guy breaks down in tears. And after I was done sharing, I just looked up and I saw all this, understanding in people's eyes. And I kind of turned to look at the guy sitting next to me. And it was someone I knew.
Oh, you
and
did?
I hadn't even noticed he was sitting there. Yeah, I didn't even realize it. And it was a guy who had been in law school with me. And he was a year or so behind me. And he just looks at me, puts his hand on my shoulder, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. And I was like, wow, okay. And so we went out to breakfast after that. And he ended up being my sponsor and helping me, work through that stuff. And so I got really serious about it. And I worked a good recovery program for about 3 years. And then we moved. And we moved from Salem, Oregon, where we were living, to Portland, which isn't very far, but, it's about an hour's drive away. But I didn't pick up any meetings when we moved. And so, but I thought, I'm fine. I'm so sober now.
I'm so sober.
I'm so sober that I don't need to find meetings here. And so I actually kind of coasted for over 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah. And then.
So you were sober that whole time? No weed, no alcohol for 10 years?
No weed or alcohol, no.
Yeah. Okay.
What I did do, though, is I learned about behavioral addictions during that time, which.
Really? Do you want to share?
I wasn't really cognitive of it at the time. Yeah, I mean, I got very, I was less than faithful in my marriage.
Would you call that a sex addiction or love addiction?
I'd say it's more of a love addiction.
Yeah.
And then I guess there was some sex addiction in there too.
They kind of go hand in hand.
They kind of go together very well.
They kind of go.
And then I got into video games, and I got a nice healthy video game addiction. A lot of my sort of love addiction was online stuff too. It was like, it wasn't
pornography and the whole, that's so common, by the way. And thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So common. And I think that's maybe one of the few things that people don't talk about a lot.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that because it's so prevalent. And I just feel like, I just feel like everybody's got a little bit of porn addiction and nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the biggest business on the internet, I think.
Yeah. We all pretend like it's not happening, but okay.
Oh yeah. That's horrible. That stuff,
Yeah. Weirdos. Okay.
So I went through that.
What about work addiction or exercise or?
Yeah. And exercise. Yeah. Definitely got into that.
I can tell you're a fit person.
I am. Exercise is where I channel almost all my addictive energy now.
But do you feel like that's a healthy form of releasing tension or?
I do.
I don't even know what to call it. How do you see the exercise? That's a healthy.
I call it
outlet.
blown off steam. Yeah,
it's a healthy outlet.
As long as you don't overdo it, which I seldom do. Occasionally, I find myself going, oh, I haven't really taken a break in 2 weeks, and I'm sore and I'm tired, and so I have to force myself to take
rest.
a break.
What kind of exercise do you do?
Well, I varied it a lot in the last year. I used to do pretty much just cardio and weights, and I would alternate days on that. Now, I do.
What kind of cardio are you like? Do you like running or cycling or?
Now, most of my cardio is running.
Okay.
Or actually, my favorite workout is to work out on a boxing heavy bag.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's just a great full body workout. And talk about blowing off steam and
for sure,
releasing all stress and tension. It's there's nothing better for me. And then I do yoga at least 3 times a week.
Oh, that's really meditative too, right?
Yes. Yeah. So blending the physical with the mindfulness has been huge for me. Just getting the mindfulness practice has really been life-changing, I think, for me in the past year.
Oh, absolutely. I'm curious though. So you had that long period of sobriety. You did a little switching up addictions. That's really about checking out, right? It's like life is stressful. And most people, let's just say most humans, but a lot of people in recovery don't do well with feeling the negative feelings or the discomfort. And so we suppress rather than address and resolve, right?
Correct.
So we use all kinds of there's a million ways. I've been sober for 24 years. I can find a bazillion ways to check out and to numb, like that outside of something that's detrimental, right? There's TV, there's books, there's, I wish I could get addicted to exercise because I feel like that would be good. But I feel like the 2 things, if I could get addicted to, it'd be exercise and work, because then I'd be rich and fit, but it hasn't worked out that way.
Yeah.
But so anyway, you check out for a period of time and then using other things, but then you relapse, right? When did the relapse happen after 10 years? Did something trigger you to relapse? Or just...
it was simply being at a party, a really nice late summer party outside, and this group of people lit up a bowl of pot, and I was just standing there, and someone passed it to me.
It's so easy.
It was just, I just thought, yeah, I do want to smoke that, and so I smoked that. And
was your wife there?
She was, and she was right next to me, and she's kind of looking at me.
She said, "What the hell are you doing?" But
she didn't. Yeah, she didn't really say anything.
At that point, I was. Anything? Did she smoke it too?
She not really. No, she wasn't.
No?
She fooled me when we got together because she drank tequila on the rocks, and I thought, oh, she's a badass. I like this one. She's going to keep up with me. And as it turned out, she would have like 2 of them in the course of an evening. And I didn't notice, I'm just slamming away what I'm drinking. But no, she wasn't really a pot smoker, not a big drinker. She's a normie, and we're no longer married. But she kind of looked at me, but she didn't say anything. At that point I was doing really well, professionally. I was a good dad. I mean, she knew about one affair I had, and we went through therapy for that and survived that. And
you did.
And I was able to actually be good for a while after that. And then I didn't. I didn't have a program at that point, so I didn't really have any kind of spiritual maintenance or anything. I was just, self-will was how I avoided alcohol and drugs. And I thought that's good enough, hell.
Yeah. But we still find ways to self-destruct if we don't address the underlying issues, right? And I feel like that's the thing. Even in the big book and 12-step meetings, they say alcohol is but a symptom. So any kind of addiction or obsession is just a symptom of a deeper issue. And when we don't address that deeper issue, we have a compulsion that we can't control. We find a million ways to check out to avoid to avoid that pain that's bubbling up. So, so what happened? You went, are you back in the rooms then? Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started smoking the pot, and this was about almost 20, so it's late summer 2010, I think. I think I got the years right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did from then on out is I smoked pot for a couple of years, and then I would quit for a while. I wasn't in the rooms at all, but I would just kind of take a break every now and then. And, I actually thought things were fine. Things were going well. And fast forward a little bit to 2013. So in 2013, 14, I have to remember my time frame here. Yeah, 2013. So in 2013, I divorced, or I left my wife, and about a year later, I had gotten into a relationship with another woman. We broke up, and I decided I was going to drink again. And so in 2014, I made a conscious decision that I could drink. So I had finally, and I hadn't, and it all happened within a couple of weeks from the moment I thought about it to when I was drinking. And I honestly had not considered it. I didn't want it at all for that 14-year period.
That's amazing.
Since 2000. Even while I was smoking pot, I knew alcohol is bad. It's like hot stove, don't touch, right?
Right.
That was my attitude. But I was actually over in London, and my daughter went to college there. And so my son and I went over to visit her. And it occurred to me, we're sitting in a pub one evening having dinner. And it occurred to me, wow, I never drank in England. I'd never been to England, but And
Man,
I
seems like you should drink if you're in another country.
Right. And for some reason I thought, having a beer at an English pub sounds kind of good. And so I told my kids my daughter was about 20 at the time. My son was 18 or 17 or 18. He was 18. And I said, I might have a beer. And they looked at me like I just said, I'm going to go shoot that guy over there. Right. Like, it was like,
they were shocked.
They were shocked. They were like,
are you sure?
They're like, what? And I immediately said, I'm just joking. I just knew that was not appropriate. And I said, I'm just joking. Well, after I got back, I had planted that seed in my head, that I could, right?
Wow.
Like somehow I had told myself it was okay.
Right.
And I said to myself, basically, well, you can have a couple beers. You can do this, And I went and bought a 6-pack, and I drank the 6-pack, and then I went out. And it was just like it was where I left off.
Just picked up right where you left off.
Exactly like that. And it was, 15 drinks later, I'm in someone's apartment doing cocaine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fast.
Yeah. And so that little alcohol relapse lasted about 3 weeks. And it was probably twice a week for 3 weeks. So half a dozen times. And on the last one, and I didn't do cocaine on every one of them, but on the last one I did. And it was one of those,
mild heart attacks.
Well, I didn't have a heart attack, but you're out of cocaine at 6 a.m. and you can't remember where your credit card is, and
or it has cocaine all over it.
You're supposed to go to work in 3 hours. Yeah.
Oh, gross. Wednesday morning.
Yes, exactly. It was a weekday morning, and I said, this is I'm not doing this anymore. So then I got back in the rooms after that.
Oh, okay.
And,
what was your experience like going back with? Because I see so many people who relapse and they go back and they're so full of shame, and my heart goes out to them, because I'm just like, it's more normal. If you're an addict or an alcoholic, it's more normal for us to be drinking. It's a miracle when we stay sober, right? Did you feel all that shame and guilt when you went back?
I did. I felt really stupid because I had, in my mind, I had almost 15 years of alcohol free. Although, for the last 4 of those years, I was smoking pot. So I'm not sure, they're different, but it's still not sober.
Right. Yeah.
And so I, but I went back and I just did this stuff. I didn't start working the steps. I just started going to meetings every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point in my life, I was living alone in downtown Portland. After about 6 or 8 months, I moved in with my girlfriend at the time, and our relationship was volatile, and I decided that pot would help me get through that relationship.
Numb out.
And I'm not blaming her. That was how I dealt with my own, emotions. And so
if you're in a relationship that requires you to be on drugs, it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. And so I kind of went through this cycle for a few years of and at this point, we had like cannabis vape pens, all this new technology for marijuana, right?
Makes me so mad.
Yeah.
Missed out on all of it.
Very easy to hide that, let me tell you.
Right, yeah. It's so scary. I hear it's super potent now, too.
Super potent.
Oh, so scary.
So I went on this in and out of the rooms. I'd get 60, 90 days. At one point, I think I got 6 months. And then I'd pick up the pot again. Mm-hmm. And then I drank a little more on a vacation. And, so I just had this sort of in and out. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Right. And and so in 2017, in early 2017, in January, actually, it was a snowstorm. I was out running with our dog in the snow, and I felt this pop in my groin, and I had emergency impacted hernia. Oh my God! So I had to go get surgery, and I got some really good painkillers for that. And after that, I just got into this really low depression. I started thinking dark things,
suicidal thoughts, or
how can I get some life insurance and accidentally, disappear? Basically, I started thinking of it. I didn't take steps, but I started to think about it, and I didn't want to drink, but I actually got to a point where the marijuana wasn't working. It just didn't work. I would use it. I'd get kind of buzzed, but I'd still have that rat race in my head going on. I still couldn't sleep. I was just miserable. And I was out, almost a year ago, I was out in a field walking the dogs, and I was miserable. I had this cannabis vape pen, and I'm sucking on that thing there's no tomorrow. And it's not working. And I flung it. I just flung it into this pond because I was so annoyed with it. And I looked up, and I've never done this before. I looked up and I said, God, what do I have to do? Out loud. Yeah. And then the strangest thing that I've ever had happen. And it was like my head was electrified. It was tingling. The whole top of my head started to tingle. And my mind, it was like I was standing there in a field, but it was like I was having a dream. And it was like a movie playing in my head. And it took me back to this childhood traumatic incident. And it played out in my mind, and I could smell the smells. I could hear the noises. And it was so overwhelming. I had to sit down. And then I heard a voice say, you need to deal with that. And I just lost it. I mean, I totally broke down. And these two little corgis, they jumped on my lap, and they're licking me. They're like, what is wrong with you? And it took me probably a half hour, 20 minutes or a half hour to kind of get my stuff together. I realized, wow, okay, that's obviously significant. I don't know if this is the universe or God. I have no idea, but obviously I need to deal with that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's very clear. And I said, okay, I got to figure out how to deal with this, right? And I didn't know what to do about it. So I went back home, and at the time, the girlfriend I was with, she comes home and she sees me and she knows there's something majorly wrong with me. And she basically says, I don't know what your deal is, but I know you're smoking pot and I'm sick of it, and this isn't working out, And I said, yeah, you're right. I got to go. And so we broke up, and the next day, we sort of had we kind of reconciled, and she said, what is going on? And I said, well, I got this stuff I got to deal with. And she basically pulled it out of me. And
You told her what happened? She was the first person?
Yeah. First person. Yeah. And again, I lost my emotion. I totally broke down. But then I felt lighter, physically lighter, literally. Like it was like something lifted from me. And so I went back to recovery immediately, like that night, that very evening.
Oh, wow.
Found a meeting, and I started to find people, and I had some friends who were kind of in recovery that I connected with, who occasionally contact me and go, hey, how's it doing? Are you coming back? And so I reached out to them, and I started to share that story with more people. And I realized, that I needed to do some work on that. And I started to get into mindfulness at about the same time. I just started researching stuff online. I got a hold of Gabor Mate's book.
Oh, right. Yeah. I was just going to say, I'm dying to get that guy on the podcast because he talks about the childhood trauma and.
Exactly. Yeah. And somehow I got to that, and I think I heard him on a podcast interview, actually. I think that's
is that right?
Yeah. And so I read that, and I started doing more research, and I got into, I found Tommy Rosen's book on Recovery 2.0.
Yeah.
And I read that, and I went to a retreat with Tommy Rosen.
Nice.
I started getting into yoga, and I got into Anna David's program. I started to do all these different things and go into meetings. And I just, ever since then, and my life's been great. I mean, I found a spiritual connection, and that's been the key. I start my day with, meditation and some yoga and some reading and some writing. And,
what is your morning routine like?
Typically, I usually wake up pretty early, 4:30 or 5.
Oh, that is early.
I naturally wake up at that time.
Okay.
Most of the time. And then I will start with some simple Kundalini yoga, which is mostly like breathing. There's breathing exercises and some movements, spinal movements and things like that to waken up the nervous system.
Okay.
And then some meditation.
Do you do like the formal sitting down and hands in the lap?
Most of the time, yeah, I sit. Most of the time, I'm sitting on a meditation cushion, and sometimes it's only 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10. But I'm not a half hour kind of meditator. The Kundalini yoga is actually pretty meditative too.
Yeah, it's like what do they call that? Like a moving meditation?
It is, yeah. And then I'll write. I do at least 3 pages in my journal.
Oh, wow. Is that pen to paper or
pen
typing?
To paper.
Yeah, don't you think that there's something different between pen to paper and typing?
Oh, it's totally different.
Totally different. I had a guy I admire say that he's got a BS filter in his elbow because when he bends his elbow and starts to write, the truth comes out.
It's true. I think that's true. I find when I type, I tend to want to correct too much.
Yeah, I see the red squiggly line a lot.
Yep.
Tend to want to self-edit.
So with the pen to paper, you just go.
Right.
And so I basically try to do it kind of like, the Artist's Way morning pages.
Yeah, Julia Cameron, right?
Yeah.
So describe that writing process. Is that I'll let you describe it, but what is the 3 pages? What is that like?
So I basically just write whatever is coming to mind. And it took me a while to get used to that. Yeah, whatever is coming to mind. And sometimes there's something clearly on my mind, right? From the meditation and prayer that I do. And sometimes it's just, I don't know what I'm writing about, and I'll just start writing, and I'll write, I don't know what to write. And then, whatever is coming to mind, and typically I'll get into something. Since I've been doing this book, a lot of times I'll start, I'll do a little section of that. Or an outline of, a chapter that I haven't written yet. But most of the time it's just working through things that are on my mind. It may be something to do with the relationship I'm in. It may be something to do with work. It may be just something to do with, someplace I'd like to go, or something I want to do, or, here's what happened yesterday. All kinds of different things, but typically it's not that hard. Once I get going, it just goes.
Okay, so you do the morning pages, so that's 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing.
Yep.
What happens after the writing?
And now, lately in the last few weeks, I've been also doing at least something on the book, and sometimes it may be I'm going to edit part of a chapter. Sometimes I might just get a couple paragraphs, but something. Right. And it kind of depends on my day of what's coming up.
Don't you find, so isn't writing sort of interesting? Like some days it just flows, and then other days it's like pulling teeth. Sometimes it's just hard to get there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But do you find the regular writing, the morning pages, has helped you as a writer?
Very much so. Yeah. It's like, for me, it was kind of like opening the spigot wider. It's like the writing flows much more smoothly and readily when I do the handwriting first. I don't know why, but it's like maybe it's just a warm up or something. But yeah, some days, especially, and I've also been doing it in the evenings just because I have a deadline. And sometimes the evenings are really challenging. If I'm tired, it just
Do you take a little nap or anything, or meditate?
And I'm a guy who never took naps. Now I take naps. And sometimes I have to just be able to do some writing.
Yeah, I feel like we don't. It's so funny because we push and push and push and push, and we don't think about giving our brain a break.
Right.
Yeah,
the brain uses a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah, we need to just let it rest for a minute, and then we're actually more productive. I started meditating at lunch because I get to work really early, and then by 2:00 I am tapped out and I can't think anymore. And someone was like, "Go meditate." There's actually a meditation room at my office. So I was like, "Oh, right, okay, yeah," and that does help. But you're under deadline, so you're writing twice a day. Like you have 2 time blocks where you're writing.
Yeah. And so if the morning I didn't get that much done, I try to do more in the evening. And then also I have weekends where I can get big blocks done. So typically that's where I'll get a large chunk done. And sometimes like my evening is just editing. Like just editing. Just going over something I've already written to edit it.
Do you try to just get it all out first pass and then go back and edit? Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
that works best for me.
Instead of trying to edit as you go.
Yeah, edit as I go is frustrating.
Yeah,
and then I get in a bad mental state, and then the whole thing just kind of breaks down.
It all falls apart. Yeah,
and it took me a while to get that way because in my work I edit as I go for the most part.
Right, you do a lot of writing as a professional.
Yeah, but it's very structured. There's a certain style, and I seldom need to edit very much.
It's unemotional.
Yeah. And it's got a structure. It's this. I'm not. It's very different. But yeah, if I edit as I go with the book, it's just too tedious. I can't do it.
So what is your hope for the book?
My hope is that it reaches people that are in the same situation I was in, where they bottled something up or some things up their whole life, and they figure out how to release it, because that's the central message in my book is, gotta let stuff go. And because I could never get comfortable with myself until I did that. And I had a lot of successes, outwardly. But ultimately I just didn't like myself, and I had shame, and I had fear, and I couldn't release that until I dealt with some of the things that happened way long time ago, 40 plus years ago.
Yeah, you made a decision about who you were as a young person.
Yeah.
So when you say we need to let it go, how do you let it go?
For me, the first step was just sharing it with someone who you trust, right?
Yeah.
And that alone, that was huge. Just that was huge, because that allowed me to share it with more people that I trusted, and then actually share it with people who kind of knew some things, and they could give me some feedback, and just kind of getting the message back from another human being that you're not a bad person. We've all had things that were bad that happened to us, and here's what happened to me, right? And that type of sharing, and then understanding that it's I'm not a bad. I've done some bad things in my life, but I'm not a bad person. And what really matters is, who are you today, right? Who are you right now? And what have you done to repair any damage that you've done in the past? And, I've done a fair amount of that, and it's an ongoing thing, but that's, for me, it was sharing it. And then the process of writing it is actually an extra benefit, in that I found when I wrote these things down, they lost power.
Right.
And I could look at it objectively. It's like, it's not just subjective anymore. It's like, okay, my clients have been horribly traumatized, right? And I'm able to objectively help them through that situation, for example. With my own stuff, if it's in my head, I can't do that. But when I put it on paper, I can kind of analyze it more and understand, for example, one of the things that I can share that happened to me when I was young is I was sexually abused by another boy who was a few years older than me. And I kind of wrote that off in my mind as, this is dumb stuff that happens to adolescents, right? When I wrote that out, I realized, I never used the term molested or sexually abused in my own mind, and I never shared it with anybody either. But when I wrote it out, I was able to kind of process it in a different way. Like, that, and how did that affect me? And I always thought it didn't affect me. It did. It affected me because that was my first sexual experience, right? And so, and I was able to kind of then write about how it affected me. And then, talk to professionals about it and process that stuff. So for me, that's what's been helpful in processing these things I've held inside me all these years. In recovery programs, typically what I found when I went through it in 2000 and afterwards is I did a lot of the step work, but I did it all on things that I did after I started drinking, right? You do a fourth step.
Right.
You do a fifth
Right.
step.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really about anything that got me drinking in the first place. It was about all the dumb, crazy, bad things I did when I was loaded. And I did a lot of that. I mean, I went through that pretty thoroughly. I've done it again since then. But getting back to the childhood stuff, I'm not sure the 12 steps really get there. And that was something that, when I read Gabor Mate's book and then Tommy Rosen's book, and started doing some of that work, I realized that there's a little bit of a gap here with a lot of the recovery programs, because they don't go into that, and maybe they shouldn't, because it's more, I don't know, maybe that's better for the professionals.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so great. I'm so glad you shared that. And I mean, I actually had a very similar experience in my childhood with an older girl. And it changed, those experiences change who you think you are, and while you were sharing, you mentioned having to think about who you are today. So I want to ask you, who are you today?
Who am I today? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm a guy who today I try to be, a couple things. One, I try to be grateful. It's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I think about it, the easier it gets. I try to be grateful for, obviously, a lot of good things have happened to me, especially the past year. I have 2 wonderful children. They're just my best friends. And I have a good, I work for myself. I don't have a boss. I have a good, career. And so even being grateful for the challenging things that happen, and that's where I know I've made progress, is when I've been able to do that. I try to be social with people. I try to connect with others who are in recovery, which is something I used to never do. I mean, I did it when I got sober in 2000 somewhat, but I've always been sort of a loner, independent, island kind of a guy. So I try to be, helpful to others, grateful, and I'm definitely a work in progress, but happy. I'm happy,
happy?
And that's, I'm generally, I'm not, I try not to be too elated, because if I get too happy, then it's a little dangerous.
You want to stay in balance. Can I
ask
you?
I want to try to stay in balance.
Can I ask you, do you feel like you're a good person?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I feel like I honestly do. I feel like I'm a good person. I still have, deep running things that I'll probably always have to deal with. One of those sort of stems from my transitory childhood.
Yeah.
Being able to really connect and keep connections with people takes work for me.
Sure.
And then the other is the shame, years of shame carrying, it's hard to just ditch that.
Of course. Yeah. It takes time.
And I find, in the past year, the things that have been the most difficult is navigating, romantic situations. And so that's where these things generally tend to pop up. I'm currently dating a wonderful woman, and I'm very happy. And, I don't want to jinx it or anything, but, so it's, I think I'm a good person, and I like my work. I do good stuff. I help people. And I try not to cause harm. I'm not sure I'm always successful at that. But.
Well, you're a helper, and I think that that says a lot about you. And I feel like you have a lot of courage, because you were able to write this book and speak the things that you were ashamed of. And I see a certain level of surrender and acceptance in that. And I just think that is so courageous. So thank you for doing that and showing others that it's okay, that they can do it too. I think you're a great example.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, it's taken me a long time to get there, but anyone can do it. It's really, if I could do it, anyone can do it, because I was very stubborn and resistant.
Not only stubborn, but smart. And they say that intelligence is used in service of the ego. So I don't know how smart. I've been lucky. Smart. Well, no, I think I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today and share about your writing process and everything that you've been through, because I really feel like it really is our pain stories that we kind of connect through. Maybe it's a little bit of trauma bonding, but I think that we are uniquely qualified to help others out of their pain. And that's what I see you doing. I see you really striving to help people out of their pain. So it's a beautiful thing. What else can we do with our lives? There's nothing more noble than that. So.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate what you're doing. You're doing some great work with that. You help a lot of people with your work. And I look forward to watching you blossom even more.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been on the fence about doing Anna's course, but I might just have to take the plunge and do it. I don't know.
I definitely recommend it to anybody who has any desire whatsoever to write, even if you're not sure you want to do it. It's good.
It's a good exercise. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, listen, I love her to death. I think she's an amazing writer, and I love the work she's doing too. So I'll leave links in the show notes for her course as well. And who knows, you might see me in your class. I don't know.
That'd be great. I'd love to see you there.
Yeah. I should probably just do it. I think it's starting in September.
That's right. The next one's starting in September.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much. You'll have to come back and let me know when your book launches. We'll do another podcast. You'll have to get me in your media circuit. I know you'll be in high demand at that point.
We'll see about that. But I appreciate that. Thank you. I'd love to.
Listen, you have a great day. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.